Diane Colleen Lane entered the world on January 22, 1965, in the heart of New York City. Her father, Burton Eugene Lane, was a drama coach, and her mother, Colleen Farrington, a nightclub singer and Playboy centerfold. From the outside, it might seem like the perfect mix to produce a future star, but her childhood was anything but glamorous. Her parents split before she was even 2 weeks old. Her mother left for Mexico to pursue her career, and Diane stayed with her father. But Burton's life was unpredictable. Rent wasn't always paid on time, and Diane often found herself living with friends or fellow actors when home became too unstable. She once recalled sleeping in a friend's closet because it was the only space available. That constant shifting, while painful, taught her independence early. She learned to read people quickly, a skill she would later weave into her acting. It wasn't just survival. It was training for the emotional truth she would one day bring to every role. From the moment Diane Lane stepped onto a stage, it was clear she wasn't just reciting lines. She was inhabiting them. At only 12 years old, she was performing with the legendary La Mama Experimental Theater Club in New York, a hotbed for bold, unconventional productions. This was no school play or summer camp workshop. Lane was sharing the stage with seasoned actors who treated her not as a novelty, but as a peer. That early respect lit a fire in her. 2 years later, she was cast in A Little Romance, playing opposite Sir Laurence Olivier. For most teenagers, meeting Olivier might have been intimidating enough to steal their voice. But Lane, with her quiet confidence, held her ground. She didn't try to match his theatrical gravitas. Instead, she played her role with the natural, unforced sincerity of someone who truly belonged on screen. Critics noticed. Time magazine featured her as one of Hollywood's most promising young talents, a rare honor for someone barely in high school. The sudden fame was intoxicating and unnerving in equal measure. She was still taking the subway to school, yet strangers now recognized her from movie posters. Magazine photo shoots dressed her up as an ingenue, but Lane herself didn't feel like one. She was still the girl who had slept on friends' couches, still figuring out who she was. That gap between the image the world saw and the reality she lived in would follow her for years. And in many ways, shaped the authenticity she later brought to her most iconic roles. Hollywood had given Diane Lane fame before she was old enough to drive, but it had also built a cage around her. In her 20s, she found herself navigating an industry that still saw her as the teenage ingenue from A Little Romance. Producers wanted marketable perfection, not the layered humanity she craved to portray. It was a subtle but constant battle, choosing between the safe roles that would keep her visible and the riskier ones that might prove she was more than a youthful face on a movie poster. Behind the cameras, her life was rarely as composed as the poised expressions she offered at premieres. Lane was no stranger to public scrutiny, and with every new project came invasive questions about her private life. Her marriage to Christopher Lambert brought her stability for a time, and the birth of her daughter Eleanor in 1993 was a grounding force. But the demands of two actors working on opposite continents took their toll. The divorce that followed was quiet, without public fireworks, but it left her determined to balance her career with her role as a mother. Her second marriage to Josh Brolin was more turbulent, its difficulties amplified by the unforgiving glare of celebrity gossip. Lane never indulged the media with dramatic public statements. Instead, she addressed the truth in carefully chosen interviews, acknowledging her flaws without surrendering her dignity. This self-awareness became one of her most defining traits, a refusal to let either adulation or scandal dictate her sense of self. The weight of these years was visible in her work. Roles she took during this period began to show cracks in the veneer. A woman laughing on screen while carrying unspoken grief, a smile that hinted at unhealed wounds. For Lane, performance was never about pretending. It was about filtering her own experience into characters who felt real. And perhaps for those who looked closely, the characters were also her way of processing life outside the frame. When Diane Lane stepped onto the set of Unfaithful in 2001, she was stepping into more than just another acting job. She was stepping into a crucible. This was a film that would strip away any safety net she'd relied on in her career. There were no costumes to hide behind, no sweeping epic to distract from her face. The entire story hinged on her ability to portray the private storm of a woman pulled between devotion and desire, without ever making her feel like a caricature. Lane didn't just play Connie Sumner, she inhabited her. Every glance, every pause, every breath in Unfaithful carried a dual weight, the intoxicating rush of newfound passion and the crushing burden of guilt. In one of the most memorable scenes, her face alone told the story, eyes fluttering between euphoria and shame as her mind and heart wrestled in real time. No grand speech, no heavy-handed explanation, just pure, unfiltered human conflict. The role was a revelation for audiences and critics alike. It was raw without being messy, sensual without being exploitative, and devastating without tipping into melodrama. Lane earned an Academy Award nomination, but more importantly, she earned a place in the conversation about the most emotionally intelligent performances of her generation. Unfaithful wasn't simply a movie in her filmography. It was the moment the industry realized she was more than just a talented actress. She was a force capable of carrying the full complexity of the human experience. And after that, there was no going back. For her or for the way Hollywood saw her. By the early 2000s, Diane Lane had something most actors spend decades chasing: name recognition, critical respect, and offers for major studio films. But with that came the usual Hollywood bargain. Take the glossy roles, keep your profile high, and play the game. Lane decided against it. She began turning down parts that would have made her a permanent fixture in blockbuster franchises. It wasn't because she didn't value success. It was because she wanted the right kind of success. For her, the magic of acting was in the raw moments, the unpolished truths, and the small gestures that said more than an explosion ever could. This decision meant fewer roles, but it also meant more control over her narrative and the types of stories she brought to life. Her choices reflected a deliberate rejection of the Hollywood machine that often trades authenticity for spectacle. Instead of chasing billion-dollar box office receipts, she leaned into character-driven dramas, even if they came with modest budgets and quieter releases. She favored scripts where the stakes weren't about saving the world, but about saving oneself. Navigating heartbreak, identity, and the fragile nature of relationships. What emerged was a body of work that felt lived in and deeply human. Whether she was playing a woman finding her footing after divorce or a mother holding her family together in the face of uncertainty, Lane infused each role with a sincerity that can't be faked. It was this honesty, the ability to disappear into a role without vanity, that made her work resonate so deeply with audiences. When the frenzy of red carpets and paparazzi flashes fades, many actors find themselves scrambling to hold on to relevance. Diane Lane took a different path. She stepped back deliberately, trading the constant hum of Hollywood for a quieter, steadier rhythm. She relocated much of her life away from Los Angeles, spending more time on the East Coast, where anonymity is easier to find, and fame doesn't dictate every conversation. Here, she's free to walk her dog without makeup, sit in a cafe without interruption, and simply exist as Diane, not Diane Lane, the movie star. Her daughter, Eleanor, remains at the center of her world. Lane has spoken about the joy of watching her grow into an independent adult and how that transition reshaped her own priorities. Acting is still a part of her life, but no longer the axis it spins on. She chooses roles like one might choose a fine wine, carefully, selectively, savoring them rather than consuming them in excess. When a project does pull her back into the spotlight, it's usually because it offers substance, a story worth telling, a character worth inhabiting. She's uninterested in playing stereotypes or joining projects that lack heart. This self-imposed filter has kept her filmography lean but meaningful, a curated reflection of both her skill and her values. It's this intentional balance between public life and private sanctuary that defines Diane Lane now. She's proof that a Hollywood career doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing gamble. It can be something you hold on your own terms without losing yourself to the machine. If you found her journey inspiring, give this video a like, subscribe for more, and explore our other deep dives into the lives of Hollywood's most fascinating figures.